I love this cartoon from Dilbert. It has been a standard for me for probably 20 years almost. But this cartoon really illustrates some of the challenges that MBA programs and business schools in general have around the human resource function. And you can see, this new member of the management team comes in and he's got an MBA and he's really qualified and he's wonderful. And so Alice asks him, have you been taught how to motivate people? Well, no. And well, what about identifying and hiring the right people? Yeah, maybe that was optional. What about negotiation skills and strategy and business writing? No, none of those. I'm just really good at finance and accounting and economics. And so he becomes a highly qualified leader because he's good at math. And while I don't want to diminish the importance of finance and accounting and economics, those financial issues are really important. Go back to the previous slide. They're an important asset. We can't function without money and all the things that it gives us. We need to have money. But managing people is not about managing money. Managing people is about managing humans that have minds of their own and don't all behave lockstep the same way you want them to behave. It's not like a piece of raw material that always does the same thing every time you bend it or every time you heat it, right? It does the same thing. It's different with people. People don't always behave. And so to Alice's point here, someone who can manage money and who understands money is not always someone who can manage people and manage strategy and manage the organization. This is something that we need to address. So part of HR's job is helping you as managers to be able to focus on how to best lead your people, how to best manage them on a daily basis. And when I mean daily basis, I mean, how do I coach them? How do I get them to behave the way I want? How do I motivate them? How do I create reward systems or intrinsic rewards that are going to get them excited? How do I keep them engaged so that I'm leading them towards the direction that I want them to go into? This is the real challenge of HR management. It isn't just about designing these systems, but it's about you as managers and knowing how to do this on a daily basis. This next slide gives you a really great idea how the human resource function fits into the larger systems in the organization. And I'm going to start you at the top and work you down through it. At the very top you see the external environment. And there's obviously a two-way arrow there because this is the stuff that sits outside of the company, the things that influence it. Your external environment. The government affects us. The changes in technology affects us. Labor unions affect us. Customers and competitors and suppliers, all of these groups, they all have an impact on how we do our business every day. And all of these things then affect the HR decisions that we have to make every day. So we first have to acknowledge that there's this external environment going on out there that's always got stuff kind of going on. And then that influences the boundaries of the organization inside there. You can see across the very top of the organization box, you see missions and goals and strategies and policies and plans and programs, and all of these things are the things that help the organization function to do the things that they need to do in the way that they need to do them. And all of those factors are what give the organization some frame of reference and some direction in which to lead people. But you have to have that in place first. That's part of the role of top management team, is to decide the strategic direction of the company and to communicate the policies and the procedures and the plans to get us there. And part of HR's job is to help inform what those programs and policies are going to look like too. So if you then look down in the left-hand column, you see financial systems, sales and marketing, operations, manufacturing, accounting and control. Human resource management is like a subheading under there. If you think about it as a box, you would double click on and you would open up that box and the human resource management system opens up, just like you could double click on accounting and control and the functions of accounting and control would pop up. So what we're looking at right now is a subset of the functional concerns that are going on in the organization for human resource management. And in the HR system, it's broken down into three major categories. We've got the planning process, We then have the implementation process, and we have the outcomes and evaluation. And of course, we're always evaluating what's going on. It's a continual process. So even though this seems to be step 3, it's always an ongoing process. So yes, it's after we implement something, we want to evaluate it. It always kind of comes after evaluation, but it's not a linear thing where first I have to do all my planning, and then I do all my implementing, and then I do my outcomes. I'm planning, implementing, and doing outcome evaluation all the time. Things are changing rapidly, and you would do this in any function. If I may, whether you're in marketing or you're in finance, you have to have a plan, and you're implementing that plan, and then you evaluate it. It's something we're doing all 3 of those things all at the same time. But specifically here, the planning process, what happens in the planning for the organizations, they have to plan how many people we need, and are we growing, or are we shrinking, or are we stabilizing, and are we going to hire people, or are we going to instead, are we going to lease people or just use temps, or are we going to hire people who have skills, or are we going to train them in-house? But we have to make a plan for who we have in our company, what we expect in terms of turnover, because people are going to leave, people come and go all the time. We need to know who's going to come and go. We need to be able to predict that. We need to then make sure we've got a plan in place to grow as we need to grow, or to shrink as we need to shrink, whatever that might be. And we have a multitude of strategies which we'll get into when we talk about forecasting a little bit later in the term. So that's the first box. Our second box is then, how do we design the jobs to meet the needs of the organization and make sure that the tasks are getting done and that people have the right skills to do those tasks, and the jobs are designed in such a way that people are motivated to do their job. We'll deal with this concept of intrinsic motivation in the lecture on motivation theories. Lastly is this idea of career planning. I mean, organizations are more concerned about their plan for how they want their company to grow, and that overlaps with the employee's plan for how they want their career to grow. And so career planning is a big part of that process as well. How does the organization see your career? How does the organization expect you to achieve those things? And that's where it starts to head in that direction. Once we are done with our planning, we go into the implementation phase, and there are a bunch of different functional areas in here. Number one, on the staffing side, it's recruiting and selecting people, attracting people to the company, and then placing them, assessing them, and placing them in the right job. This may seem hard or easy, depending on your perspective, but the easy part of recruiting and selecting is if you do a really good job recruiting good people, it makes selection easier. And if you are really good at assessing people, you can find pretty much a lot of people who are able to do a job. The harder thing is not just finding people to do the job, but finding people to do the job well within the context of my company, my culture, my mission and vision, people that are consistent, have consistent work ethic and values as I do. That's a harder match. So the person-job match is relatively easy in comparison to the person-organization match. Finding the right person to fit in to the company is the bigger challenge here. But both of those, work hand in hand, and we'll spend some time talking about how we can do interviews and how we can assess people. Many of you as managers won't be doing initial assessments. I know some of you are psychologists in the class, but generally speaking, a lot of folks are much more interested in, in doing the interviews and understanding how to interview people. And it seems like it's a really simple thing, but what's really essential is that we have to design interview questions that are going to be related to the job. We don't want to be asking broad questions about who's their favorite football team or what have you, but we need them focused on specifically what is important for the job, and how do we then make hiring decisions around that. So some of the things that we'll be doing in this class is helping you to learn how to assess a job description, come to an understanding of what the knowledge, skills, and abilities are for somebody to do that job, and how do you then write questions and assess people to do that, because you may be handed that job. Here, hire somebody, decide which of these 3 people you want, and you've got to work off of this information to make a decision who you think is the best person. In terms of compensation, there's less flexibility around compensation because base pay is determined largely by the top management team and by the HR function. They know what the pay structure should look like, and they design a pay structure around that. But, and the same thing for the benefits, but it's the pay for performance stuff that we're much more concerned about. As I evaluate people, as I do performance reviews, I then need to figure out, how well did somebody perform, and will there be money to give them a raise? How do I assess them and then give them the appropriate feedback on that, and then give them the appropriate reward? This is all part of the motivation system, right? We need to reward people in an appropriate way, and we do this intrinsically and extrinsically with job design and pay and benefits, but our goal is, how do we pay people appropriately so that they take us seriously and that they continue to want to do the work that we have set out for them to do. Performance management is that box in the middle, and we certainly can argue that there's a lot of these factors influence performance management, right? Recruiting and hiring the right people with the right skills and the right learning orientation affects performance. Paying people appropriately for their performance affects performance, right? Training people to have the skills affects performance. And if unions are involved in the process, the same sort of thing occurs. They have a say in the performance management of people. But performance management is a complex topic. It involves doing performance appraisals, yes, but it also involves coaching people, mentoring people, helping to develop them. It involves making sure we've got good policies in place that are being followed so that people are performing the way we want them to perform, and that when they have extenuating circumstances, like they may have drug addiction or alcoholism or personal problems that are interfering with their ability to perform, or we may have an unsafe workplace that's creating a problem as well, our goal is to intervene when we can to make sure employees are getting the help they need. Otherwise, we lose, because we've already invested in them. We lose their ability to function, and we lose our investment. And so our goal in performance management is, how do we find a way to maintain our investment, to keep our employees, and to move forward from there. On the right-hand side, I've already mentioned development and unions and labor relations. On the development side, what we're talking about is, how do we train people in the skills that they need to do their job today? And in the career management side of things, again, going back to the point on career planning, how do I help employees to manage their career? How do I develop a system in place where I know I have a succession plan, where people know that they're on the track to be promoted, to be advanced in the company to higher levels? Are they getting the skills and experiences that they need to be developed in that way? We'll spend the better part of the last week of the term, or the last couple of weeks of the term, really getting into this idea of performance management and coaching, and we'll be working very clearly on how can we develop those skills. So we'll be doing small little vignettes where you guys will record yourself giving feedback to people, scripting what it is that you want to do in terms of providing people with the feedback that they need and desire to be better employees. I mean, your primary goal as a supervisor or a manager is to develop your employees and to help them to perform the best, so your unit, your division, your department performs at its best. And if we don't give people the coaching feedback that they need on a regular daily basis, with like course corrections, right? Moving here, moving there, getting them to where they need to, we're going to have some real problems getting our employees to be successful. Labor relations is the last one. Not every company has issues around labor relations because not every company is unionized. I will tell you, in my humble opinion, that the better a job the company does in terms of recruiting and selecting and paying people fairly and managing them well, the less likely they are to worry about union issues. You're less likely you are to see a union wanting to organize a company. When you do the right thing by your employees, when you've built trust, and when you follow through and do the things that are asked of you, you will find that your employees will do a great job. So, all that being said, as I said, the last box is all about evaluation and outcomes. What impact do our behaviors have all these activities that we're engaged in, what impact do they have on productivity, what impact do they have on profitability, what impact do we have on turnover. Are we losing more people? Are we having problems with government regulations where we're getting caught all the time with our hand in the cookie jar? So we need to, have an ethics program. And so, that's part of what we need to manage. And just making sure our working conditions are in good shape, that our policies, procedures, and practices are making sure that our workers feel safe, whether it's safe from the equipment that they work with, safe from coworkers who might go a little crazy, or safe from the outside environment, somebody coming in and doing something inappropriate. And safety isn't just about, physical safety, but it's also about psychological safety and making sure that, for example, people don't get sexually harassed by vendors or by customers or things like that. Becomes one of those bigger issues that we'll be addressing later on in the term. Briefly here, you can see this slide tries to address how the role of HR has changed over time. Why is this relevant to us? Well, because in the past, a lot of the administrative work, the managing the performance appraisals and giving people feedback and doing all the hiring was primarily done by HR. But what we notice that HR itself, the HR function, is much more involved in the strategy side of things and less so in the administrative. Who's picking up the slack? That's you guys as managers. You're picking up the slack. HR designs the systems, managers implement the systems. So you need to know how HR works in a broad-based way so that when you get into organizations, if you're not already, you know how to manage them on a daily basis.